And now with our lesson for this morning, Tim Junkins.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. If you're here to see you like Cole, I humbly apologize. So, if you're here to see me, great. Oh, it's official. It's legal. It was passed by Congress. It's okay. You can now put up your Christmas decorations. It was very firmly an established rule in my household growing up that was the rule, because otherwise you would drive yourself crazy with Christmas themed stuff. Because it's always the day after Halloween or something like that. I always suspect that people are just kind of throwing Christmas decorations over their Halloween decorations. I'm like, is that a ghost covered in lights? Does that scarecrow have a Santa hat on it? But no, it's now Thanksgiving weekend. We're in the clear. It's time for Christmas, and everybody's really not ready for it. Am I right? So, I mean, I'm not ready for the year to be over because I get into that mindset every year. That mindset of I look at the past year and I look at all the bad things that are going on now and that have gone on in the past, and I say, okay, it's going to get better after Christmas. The next year will be better, and then, it rolls around to November, December of the next year, and we're kind of in the same position we are every year. But it's now, we're now getting to that season, and it's that time of year where we see our family way more often than, we usually do, and we spend time with each other, and we reminisce about, the days of old, and, I very fondly reminisce every year about my Christmases as a child. I very fondly reminisce of those. And it was in the vein of this that I got thinking on the train of thought about the idea of where we come from and who we are as people. And I wanted to talk about the principles of foundations today. The passage we're going to be looking into is in Matthew chapter 7, and we'll be getting to that in just a minute. But I kind of wanted to explain what I'm talking about when I say foundational principles. If you look up foundation in the dictionary, there are a couple of different definitions for it. The basis of groundwork of anything, the moral foundation of both society and religion, the natural or prepared ground or base on which some structure rests, the lowest division of a building, wall, or the like, usually of masonry and partly or wholly below the surface of the ground. The act of founding, setting up, establishing, etc., or the state of being founded. These are the principles behind the word foundation. The idea that this is the starting point, the groundwork that you lay before you build a new building, whether that is literal or just an analogy, because Jesus uses foundational principles as an analogy in Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7, of course, being part of the Beatitudes, the world's most famous sermon, encompassing Matthew 5, 6, and 7. So this is towards the end of that. And it's always a good place to go to. There is little to no situation in your life that you can't just go to Matthew 5, 6, or 7 and find an answer to your question. You got a question about how things are going, what you should do, what direction you need to head. Go to the Sermon on the Mount. Just go check it out. It's an amazing section. We're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 24, because Jesus is talking about the wise and foolish builders. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because I have an amazing foundation. I can look back at these different aspects of my life, and I did give my parents a heads up this morning before they came in that this was going to be a total ego trip for them, because I'm going to do nothing but talk nicely about them this morning. I mean, I mentioned it to Dad, not Mom. That's our usual line of communication. I say something to Dad, it doesn't get to Mom, the world keeps on spinning. Heads up, Mom. And so, I have an amazing foundation. I really do. I look back because the foundation of a person is based in several elements. It is based in how their family raises them. It is based in the kind of company that they keep. It is based on how much education they choose to process or the people that teach them. Like, good and great teachers get into the profession because they want to be part of that foundation, because they're surely not doing it for the money. I have known many teachers. I taught high school for a couple of years. Believe me, there's absolutely no money in it. But it was great getting, that was kind of a joke, people. No money in it, So, I'm just being better about it, truthfully. No, I'm just kidding. All right, but when I taught, it was so great because, at the end of the year, you saw the impact that you made on people. And looking back on my own life, I have an amazing foundation. I look back at my parents and the marriage and the family that they established for themselves, and how strong it is, even at this point in my life. And the friends I keep and the company I keep, and my friends are my best friends on the planet, and they've been my best friends since I was a little kid. And I know very few people who can say that, I've always had this friend. My best friend is a year younger than I am, and we've always known each other. We have always been friends, and despite any argument or conflict we may have had, we always reconcile and we always come back to that. And that's because of a good foundation. I am a better person because of the elements in my life. And this is the thing that Jesus is talking about. Matthew 7, starting in verse 24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had a foundation on the rock. All right, what Jesus is talking about here is one of the elements of foundational principles. But what he's talking about is not raising your children right. He's not talking about the company that you keep. What he's talking about is all these things he talked about. This is the wrap-up to the sermon. There's always a wrap-up. And this is the wrap-up for Jesus' sermon, is he talks about how to treat each other, and how to be kind to each other, and how to love each other, and how to respect each other. And he talks about all these things. And now on this wrap-up, he says, if you take these things and you put them into practice, you'll be like a wise man building on a good foundation. When we think about rock, we think about how immutable rock is, how solid it is, how firm a foundation it is. If you pound on a rock, you will hurt yourself. We cannot break rock. Storms cannot break rock. And so this is the analogy that Jesus is using. And in contrast, he uses sand as the opposite end of the spectrum. Verse 26. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rains came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. Sand is the opposite of rock in terms of durability. Maybe not in chemical composure, maybe not on a physical scale, but in terms of foundation, sand is pretty much the opposite of rock. It's almost fluid, in the way you handle it. You pick up a handful of sand and you wind up losing half of it as it goes through. And you can pack it with water and you can try and make a good foundation out of it. But ultimately, it's not. It's not a good foundation. And so what Jesus is talking about here with foundational principles, I have such a hard time saying that for some reason. And what he's talking about here is in the beginning, just pulling it way back, going to, when you raise your children, when you raise these people, when you seek to teach them good things, look to Jesus as the example, is what he's talking about. Because Jesus sets the ultimate example. Jesus is, God who came down from heaven. He is without sin. He is the perfect example of a role model. He is the perfect example of somebody that you should follow. Follow his example. He is a person who is an amazing leader, and he is our Savior, and he is all these amazing things. But he is also the foundational example that we can set for generations. The reason that I am a good person, I think I'm a good person, I really shouldn't be so egotistical about it, but the reason that I think that I'm a good person, am I a good person? Ego boost to feel much better. Thank you, everybody. The reason that I am a good person is because my parents are good people. And the reason they are good people is because they were raised by good people. There are elements in their life that made them good people. The reason that Christianity has survived since the time of Jesus is because good people have chosen to teach from the example of Jesus. Foundations in terms of people are formed on generations upon generations upon the teachings that I've learned, I will in turn pass on. Like, my younger brother is one of the best people I know. He's kind, and he's a good father, and he's a good husband, and he's all these great things. And his son just turned 2 last week, and the birthday party's today, and I'm very excited to, because I'm going to be a good uncle. I'm going to get him, a nice little nerdy toy, and, I'm going to be the best uncle ever. But, he will in turn teach his son the things that he has learned from his parents and his grandparents, these principles that we've learned. And it is through this that we can continue to exist as good and kind people. But the foundation of this starts with our faith. This starts with looking to the example and knowing that there is a God out there who loves us, that there is a God who created the world especially for us, and has been overjoyed by the people that we have become. Because, people can talk about how bad the world and how messed up the world is. And people can question God and, all of his infinite wisdom and wonder, why do bad things happen? But the matter of fact is, we continue to exist because we follow these teachings. Like, we haven't totally messed up the world yet, because I still see good in it. I say for every bad example, I say for every bad tragedy that befalls us as people, I say there is a good one. I say that we exist in a world that is gray at times, and we do not know where the line is. But the one immutable thing is, Jesus says, take these principles, take these and learn from them and practice them, and you will be built on a strong foundation. Because Jesus does not sugarcoat. And I think that's the important thing to focus on here. Jesus does not sugarcoat it. He does not say, if you take these teachings, you are like a wise man who builds his house upon a rock, and you will always live good days, and everything will always be perfect, and everything will always work out. Is that what Jesus talks about? No. He says the storm came. The waters rose, the wind blew, all the bad things happened at once. And it beat against the house, and the house did not fall. And in turn, he talks about building your house on the sand, on a bad foundation, how all the bad things come. And the reason that he uses the rock and the sand as an analogy for foundation is because he wants to emphasize that we have control on building our lives. We choose the foundation. We choose the building material. We choose who to build it with. And so when the bad moments come, when the storms come, and the winds blow, and the water rises, it is up to the foundation that we have established as people. And that's the point I really want to hammer home today. It's just the fact that it is the foundation that we establish as people. Now, at the end of the chapter here, after this is the big follow-up. This is after the sermon is done and he's wrapping up. Verse 28 and 29. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. My running joke with the Sermon on the Mount, whenever I teach out of it, is, Jesus is kind of unfair to us who go into the ministry profession, because he shows up and he gets the world's first sermon out there and it just kills. It's the absolute end-all best sermon that there will ever be, and so the rest of us have to follow that act. And that's always kind of my dumb little joke about the Sermon on the Mount. But Jesus comes in, he comes onto the scene, he decides to start teaching, and he teaches this absolutely breathtaking sermon where he covers everything. He covers how not to worry, he covers how to pray, he covers how to treat each other, and he teaches so efficiently that people are just absolutely blown away by it. And they were amazed because he taught as one who had authority. They recognized the fact that he was the Son of God, and they were absolutely amazed by this. And surely, this person must know what he's talking about. Because ultimately, that's what these sermons come down to, is they're placed on the validity of the speaker. I went to college, I learned the Bible, I took the test that said I could say all 66 books of the Bible in order, and I got my little degree and all that, and so, I consider myself to have some education on the subject, but I cannot teach on the same authority as Jesus. Jesus comes onto the scene and he teaches with such authority that he has to be legitimate. He has to be. He's so amazing, like in his authority, in the way he presents himself, that he demonstrates through this and the miracles and his resurrection that he is the Son of God. And so we have to give validity to what he talks about. Because whenever somebody speaks, public speaking, churches, seminars, whatever, it is always based on the speaker. And so when the speaker is the Son of God, everything he says has credibility to it. And the thing he wants to emphasize is you use this as a foundation and your house will not fall. It'll rumble, and there will be bad times, and there will be storms, and there will be moments of doubt. But it will not fall, is what Jesus is saying here. And that's a really hard point to digest. Because when the storm comes, all we want to do is let the walls come crumbling down. On a very basic, immature level, we want that to happen. Because we want to be justified to the world about how bitter or upset or angry we are. We want to we want to have this attitude with it, where when the walls come crumbling down, we can say, "Oh, woe is me," and "Oh, poor me," and give me all the sympathy, and let me be angry, and Jesus says, no, because it's so much better than that if you don't let the walls collapse. But the thing you have to remember with this analogy is, the foundation is based on how we build it. So that means when the storms come, and the wind howls, and the water rises, that is not the time to run to Home Depot. That is not the time to run out for supplies. That is not the time to barrel out into the storm and grab planks of wood and start hammering them against the house, because that's not really how building a house works. Not an expert, mind you, but I know some basic principles, like don't build during a storm. And so that's the thing that Jesus wants us to emphasize, is you set up the foundation. You build the house when it's 70 degrees and mildly breezy outside. You build it when the weather is pitch perfect. You go out and you have yourself a good time. You build the foundation. You get that house up. So when the storm does come, we'll be able to withstand it. And I know for 100% fact that my foundation is so strong because of how it was built. And it was not me alone. It was not. It is never any of us alone. I could not build a house alone, that is for sure. I could put some walls up and get a staple gun and make a really nice thing, but I would not call it a house. The foundation that was built for me was built out of my parents and my friends and my family and my teachers and the people that I will never forget, the people that I am forever indebted to. Don't let it go to your head too much, guys. Please. I want to hear about this later. You should hear the things Tim was saying during his sermon. And so, I know that I have a good foundation, and I look forward to teaching that foundation. That's one of the reasons that I got into ministry in the first place, was I was so attracted to the idea lately. I felt called to the idea of being able to go out and share this message of Jesus and to say that I believe in this and you should too. And I encourage you today that to consider this point, to consider the point that to build the foundation before the storm comes, to live a good life, to be a better person because of the teachings of Jesus, and allow yourself to be transformed by that. If you're not a Christian and you want to, and if you feel compelled, because I use dramatic words when I talk about the Bible, because I believe the Bible is dramatic. I believe it's dramatic and dynamic and beautiful and powerful and all of these things. If you feel compelled to be changed by that, then I invite you to join us in the fold, to follow the teachings of Jesus, to use that as your spiritual foundation. If you are already a follower of God and you just need to, you need a tune-up. Like, the weather's fine right now, everything's cool. If you need to patch up that window, if you need to put a hole in that wall, if you need to reinforce the foundation, then seek prayer from those who will help you build. We will help you build. We will help you reinforce. Houses do not last forever. They need repairs. They need updates. They need maintenance. Like anything else that we build in our lives, they need to be maintained. If you need maintenance, I encourage you to come forward for prayers from the congregation. And I invite you to consider these things as we stand and sing the song of invitation.
Sweet are the promises, kind is the word, dearer than any message man ever heard. Pure was the mind of Christ, endless I see. He the great example is a pattern for me. Where he leads, I'll follow. He leads, I'll follow. Where he leads, I'll follow. Follow the way. Where he leads, I'll follow. He leads, I'll follow. Where he leads, I'll follow. Follow Jesus.